It has been a week, dear friends, and I hope that you are still riding high from the blue wave we experienced on election night. I know that I am. I'm tired, but I am like still fucking jazzed by the coma that the American people woke up out of and went to work with regard to electing people across the country into seats that they need to be in order to fight back against this regime, passing propositions that needed to be passed in order to combat the fuckery that the Republican Party is trying to do. And so, as I close out the week here on the Danielle Moodie Show, I pray that all of you take this energy that we gained and move it into your communities, into your spaces and places that allow you to give back and do the work that will continue to advance a progressive agenda, not a bullshit Democratic establishment centrist agenda, but a progressive agenda that centers the needs of the most vulnerable. So, with that, I say, dear friends, let's get into it. I'm so glad that you all are here. Welcome, dear friends, to the Danielle Moodie Show, Damnation. I am so glad that you all are here. So, we begin today with some breaking news, which is important breaking news because if it is bad news for Donald Trump, it is good news probably for the rest of us. So, a judge has ordered the Trump administration to fully fund food stamps this month. That order came down about 20 minutes ago. A federal judge ordered the Trump administration on Thursday to fund food stamps in full for roughly 42 million low income Americans after admonishing the government for delaying aid under the nation's largest anti hunger program during the shutdown. The order, issued by Judge John J. McConnell Jr. of the U.S. District Court for the District of Rhode Island, marked his second legal rebuke of the administration for actions that threaten to leave millions of Americans at risk of financial hardship. Reading his directive from the bench after a short but tense hearing, Judge McConnell sharply criticized the administration for ignoring his original order last week to quickly restart payments for SNAP or food stamps. He attributed the delay in part to an attempt by Trump and his aides to disrupt the program for, quote, political reasons. At one point, Judge McConnell pointed to comments by Trump, who had threatened this week to halt all food stamp payments until the end of the shutdown. While the White House later tried to walk back those remarks, the judge still saw the president's ultimatum as evidence he had failed to comply with court instructions. The judge said this should never happen in America, the judge said, as he warned that millions of poor families could go hungry in the absence of reliable federal aid. He gave the government until Friday to make the SNAP payments, which is tomorrow. Spokespeople for the White House, the Agricultural Department, and the Justice Department did not immediately respond to comments. Let me just tell you, Donald Trump fucks his own game up by his inability to do the bare minimum, which is shut the fuck up. And why do I say that? Because it was his comments on Truth Social that Judge McConnell read from the bench that said, so you had no intention of following the court order that I issued last week. Here is Donald Trump's Truth Social statement that says that he's not going to pay out SNAP benefits until the government reopens, as if Republicans are not in control of Congress right now and are the reason for this shutdown, which was written in Project 2025 because they want to get rid of any governmental programs that help the American people. They want to nix that so that they can continue allowing for billionaires and millionaires to suckle off the tit of the government, the real welfare fucking queens. So my thing is this, right? These orders, right? These rulings are only so important as they can be enforced, right? And so if Donald Trump, as the president of the United States, which by the way, the Supreme Court gave total and complete immunity to, decides that he is going to go against these court orders, what's their recourse? Because that's what we all need to be focused on next. We've never had a president that has just been like, fuck the courts, right? So now that we have a criminal as the president of the United States who is outwardly posting on his broke down social media platform that he has no intentions of following court orders, what does the recourse actually look like? Does it look like holding Donald Trump in contempt? I mean, honestly, if a president of the United States decides that the rules no longer apply, which is what Donald Trump decided back in January, then what happens? So I will keep my eye on this, as I know that many of you will, because again, Republicans have decided to up the ante and weaponize food, right? Like that's what they are doing. They are weaponizing food because they know that Democrats actually give a shit about 42 million Americans being able to put food on their table. And right now, there are rumblings that there are Democrats that are willing, right, to cross the aisle and side with Republicans to reopen the government without any promise that there is going to be a vote on extending the Obamacare subsidies that are going to raise healthcare in this country by some 30% for some people. Myself, as I tell you all the time, I pay for health insurance out of pocket. Without the marketplace here in New York, I would not be able to have health insurance. That being said, my health insurance is already $700 a month. I cannot afford for my health insurance to go up any more than it already does, unless, of course, I just don't want to, be able to pay my rent as well. Those are real life decisions that people have to make. And I share my own story with all of you because it's important for folks to know that as a single, right, Black woman who is a content creator as my career, right? The Affordable Care Act has allowed me to be able to have health insurance and continue to be an entrepreneur. But if my healthcare goes beyond the disgusting $700 a month that it already is, yeah, I'm going to have to pull the plug on that. And I'm at an age where, frankly, I need to have healthcare. Okay. Like, things change at a drop of a dime when you reach a certain age. And so, right. But that's the position that Republicans have a majority of Americans in right now, right? Because they don't really care. This is part of their eugenics plan. This is part of their, strategy to create, right? Chaos and create hardship so that they can fill up their for-profit prisons that went through the roof when Donald Trump became president. Like that is part of the plan. Pain is a tool of this administration. So, let's go and switch gears for a moment to talk about somebody who actually does give a damn, which is Zohran Mamdani, who is now the mayor-elect for New York City. So this is a really interesting article that I pulled from The Guardian today, because I think that it's important for us to really use this time to shift our perspective and our expectations on what government should be doing for the people, right? Zohran Mamdani has been labeled as a radical, right? This radical socialist. I mean, if you saw the fucking cover of the white nationalist New York Post paper that had the sickle from Russia along with Zohran Mamdani's face and calling him, a socialist and a communist and all of these things. You would think that socialism is the most horrible thing that could ever possibly happen. And that these ideas that Mamdani floated during his campaign, which was universal child care, free buses, baby baskets, that these things are just, unconventional and couldn't possibly happen, right? They're just, we don't have the money. We don't have the money, but we constantly find the money for war. We constantly find the money to give billionaires tax cuts, but we can't possibly use our tax dollars to actually help all of us, right? Like that's considered fucking radical. And this is why I say that one, you cannot pin your hopes and dreams on one candidate, right? On one politician, but you can absolutely force all of government, right? And be a part of the solution to actually get our government to work for us instead of against us. And that is not radical. And so this article in the Guardian, they write this. After New York City's race for mayor catapulted Zohran Mamdani from a state assembly member into one of the world's most prominent progressive voices, intense debate swirled over the ideas at the heart of his campaign. His critics and opponents painted pledges such as free bus service, universal childcare, and rent freezes as unworkable, unrealistic, and exorbitantly expensive. But some have hit back, highlighting the quirk of geography that underpins some of this view. He promised things that Europeans take for granted, but Americans are told are impossible, said the Dutch environmentalist and former government advisor Alexander Verbeek in the wake of Tuesday's election. Verbeek goes on to say this: normal, that's the word. Here, taking care of one another through public programs isn't radical socialism. It's Tuesday. That view hit on the wide differences in how Mamdani's promises are seen by many across the Atlantic. Europeans recognize his vision about free public transit and universal childcare. We expect our government to make these kinds of services accessible to all of us, said Verbeek. We pay higher taxes and get civilized societies in return. The debate here isn't whether to have these programs, but how to improve them. And this is the thing that I want to talk about with regard to extractive capitalism, right? That we have been fed the idea that capitalism is the only way to work, right? That the idea that we would all work so that all of us could have is this obscene idea, socialism, communism, that has continually been fearmongered by those who benefit from extractive capitalism. But the fact is that the things that Mamdani is talking about have been instituted around the world. The question is why America, for all of its abundance, right? For all of its, oh, we're one of the richest nations, why it is impossible for our tax dollars to actually be used to help our society. Why aren't free buses and subways and universal childcare and healthcare a part of our industrialized country when in fact it is present in nations that have a smaller GDP than we do? It's because we've been socialized into believing that extractive capitalism and this, idea of pulling yourself up from your bootstraps is somehow the only way to make it. When we know this idea of rugged individualism is bullshit, right? It was the way to break down community, right? To have less expectations of government and to make everything that should be a basic need that is met by our government something that can be profited from. That is what we've been sold our entire fucking lives. And it is only now that we are starting to look around and say to ourselves, wait a minute, maybe capitalism doesn't actually work for everybody. It only works for the super, super wealthy, who are the ones that get the tax breaks while everyone else is fucking squeezed. We've been brainwashed into believing that collective care is actually the problem and the downfall of society, when it is the notion of individualism that is the fuck shit, right? Because no one makes it alone. But we've been sold this lottery mentality that tells us that we are each one scratch off away from becoming fucking Elon Musk or Bill Gates, people that inherited their wealth. And how did they do that? Through policies that made it so that white cis hetero men could pass down wealth through real estate, get loans to open up businesses, while women, Black people, and people of color were locked out of those very policies. So, folks, when you look at what Mamdani is offering, what this article unpacks at The Guardian is that this is shit that is in Turkey, in Finland, in other countries around the world that literally have less than the United States does. So when Mamdani promised to launch one city-owned grocery store in each of New York's 5 boroughs, with a view to expanding if the pilot was successful, it reminded Ash Adistabas, a foreign policy fellow at the Brookings Institute, of the city-run government grocery store she had visited in Istanbul in 2014. Back then, she had been surprised to see the heavy shelves laden with products that range from bread to lentils to basic household appliances, much of it provided by small, little-known manufacturers. Access to these stores was limited to low-income households, with families receiving a preloaded monthly loyalty card to use at these shops, she said. These city-run grocery stores in Istanbul were successful and replicated by other cities. You see, when I say and tell folks that we need to not only back these candidates and these policies, but we need to shift our expectations, is that our expectations for government to work for us have been in the shitter for quite some time. Because again, we've been indoctrinated into believing that we shouldn't want government to do stuff for us, right? Because that would be socialism. I can do things myself. Of course, until, you put tariffs on basic necessities and basic needs that put prices through the roofs, bankrupt fucking farmers, right? And put people out of work. Then all of a sudden, oh, you want government to work for you. The problem at the foundation of all of this with extractive capitalism in America is racism. Because a lot of these places that have instituted these things have more homogenous societies than the United States does. But when you're trying to feed these ideas to white people who would rather, as my friend Jonathan Metzl wrote about, die of whiteness, they want to die of whiteness to ensure that Black and brown people don't get health insurance. Because why should I be paying for those people? Well, they are also paying for fucking you. But because of racism and misogyny and all of the discriminatory policies that we put into effect, white people would rather go without, right, than ensure that everyone have. And this is the kind of mindset that needs to be shifted. Because I believe that right now, as there are long lines wrapped around food banks, as people are waiting with breathlessness to be able to get their SNAP benefits, that people are holding on to their health care, that all of a sudden socialism doesn't seem like a bad idea. Because I've been asking myself, what the fuck am I paying taxes for? Right? And I know that many of you ask the same thing. What am I paying taxes for? Right now, I'm paying so that Donald Trump can add more gold to the fucking toilet bowls in the White House, right? Right now, you're paying taxes so that Kristi Noem can get not one, but 2 fucking private jets to fly around in. That's not how our tax dollars are supposed to fucking work. They are actually supposed to work for us and for our society. But because we have been indoctrinated into lowering our expectations and believing that to be an American, you have to do everything by yourself, establishment Democrats and Republicans have been able to maintain the status quo of offering you nothing. And this is why they hate Zohran Mamdani, because here is somebody who's saying, you know what? It's not radical to care for each other. That should actually be considered the norm. And what these motherfuckers have been doing, suckling off the corporate tit, should be illegal and should be seen as fucking problematic, not aspirational. The Guardian article goes on to say, for New Yorkers, precedents for city-run grocery stores can also be found closer to home. Chicago is mulling similar plans, while Atlanta and St. Paul, Kansas have launched their own takes on municipal-run grocery stores. Mamdani's campaign also promised to make childcare free for all children in the city, ages 6 weeks to 5 years. Days before the election, the state of New Mexico provided the city with a precedent-setting example, becoming the first U.S. state to offer free childcare to all of its residents in an effort to boost its economy and raise education and child welfare levels. Again, these are projects that have been instituted in other cities and now in an entire state to not just help the poor, which is, to me, we should be centering regardless, but to help everybody, right? Like, let's move out of this individualized bullshit and actually move into collective care that we all benefit from, including the fucking uber wealthy. They go on to say this. Mamdani's platform also included a promise to provide new parents with a free baby basket that includes items such as diapers, baby wipes, nursing pads, swaddles, and books. In Finland, the baby box has been a universal benefit since 1949 and has been emulated by nearly 100 programs in 60 countries around the world. The sharp contrast in how Mamdani's policies were seen within the U.S. and abroad probably has much to do with the scant existence of a welfare state in the U.S., writer Mary Holland noted this week. To anyone living in a Western European state, the self-professed democratic socialist ideas probably sound entirely reasonable. But too many Americans, they're wildly ambitious, radical even. Again, because we've been all sold a bill of goods. And it is okay for us to shake ourselves out of the slumber that we've been in. It's okay to unlearn the fuckery that has been the American way. America is not an aspirational place. It's a place where most people are working 2 and 3 jobs just to have their basic needs met. We do not have to live like this. And being poor or being working class is not a measure of your character or lack thereof, which is something, again, that has been lied about, right? If we look at poor people and the way that the media talks about the poor, the way that politicians talk about the poor, that is a personal failure rather than a systemic one. But somehow, if you are uber wealthy, right, we're not talking about that being about your insatiable greed. No, they're geniuses and they've done it alone. And look, you can do it too. It's a fucking lie and a fantasy that we all need to get woke from and recognize that these policies that are being offered, that are being suggested, are not radical. They should be the fucking norm in one of the most abundant and wealthy countries in the world. The questions that we should be asking is, if fucking Turkey and Istanbul can do this, why can't America do it and better? That's the kind of like radical arguments and debates and fights that I would love to see inside of our politics, right, is a competition about who can come up with the best policies for the people rather than who can starve them. Speaking of which, our friend Harry Enton over at CNN went over why the GOP is in a problematic position. And look, folks, I'm not saying that this week's election was the end all be all. No, there is a lot of work to be done moving forward. And we should all know that this election was the starting point for our civic engagement, not the ending point of it. But here, Harry Enton talks about how, Donald Trump is dragging the GOP down.
I think there are a lot of Republicans who saw those polls that, showed Donald Trump low nationally, and they didn't necessarily believe him. But for Democrats, those polls are real, and they are spectacular. And the reason I say that is because take a look here. Voted for the Democratic nominee among Trump disapprovers. I got 2017, Trump's first term, and 2025 in New Jersey and Virginia. In 2017, among the Trump disapprovers, the Democratic nominees got 82% in New Jersey, 87% in Virginia. Come over to this side of the screen. If there is any idea that Republicans are going to be able to outrun Donald Trump's low approval ratings, this says, nah, they're going to be like impalas getting chased down in the African desert by a big lion. Look at this. 93% of Trump disapprovers voted for the Democratic nominee in New Jersey, and 92% voted for them in the great Commonwealth of Virginia. The bottom line is this. What those results on Tuesday night showed us is that Donald Trump is absolutely a drag on Republican candidates in New Jersey and Virginia, likely nationwide. If you are in a state where Donald Trump is underwater, you are in big, big trouble.
What does this mean nationally, though? Because that is what people are really going to be concentrating on now when we look forward to 2026 and the midterm.
Yeah, okay. So the big question is, what does it mean nationally, as you said, Sarah? Well, I mean, at this particular point, Donald Trump is at term two lows nationally in terms of his net approval rating. Look at this. These are polls that are out this week. Look at the CNN. He was 26 points underwater. CBS, 18 points underwater. ABC, 18 points underwater. The NBC Hart Public Opinion Strategies poll, he was 12 points underwater. My goodness gracious, he's down there with the Titanic, and this is what is turning in for the Republican Party. That result on Tuesday night was a Titanic proportion, just absolutely awful result. New Jersey, Virginia, Pennsylvania, in terms of those judgeships, those Supreme Court judgeships, essentially, retaining those judges. All the Democratic line candidates won. Democrats won their first statewide races that weren't federal in Georgia for the first time in a generation. What we are talking about at this particular point is Donald Trump is absolutely a drag. I spoke about it on Monday. That's what we thought was going to happen, and that is exactly what did happen. Donald Trump at this point is an absolute drag on these Republican candidates. We saw it on Tuesday night, and nationally I expect that result to hold because at this point, Donald Trump is at his term two lows.
You're talking about the Titanic. Democrats, before this, right, were on the Titanic. Their approval ratings lower than Republicans. What does that all mean?
Okay, what does that all mean, right? I think there are a lot of Republicans saying, okay, Donald Trump ain't that popular, but the Democrats aren't popular either. And those Democratic low favorable ratings, those will save us. Well, we had a test of that on Tuesday night. So what do we see here? Okay, vote for the Democratic nominee. View neither party favorably. Here's the margin. Look at this. In New Jersey, if you viewed neither party favorably, in New Jersey, Mikey Sherrill won that vote by 66 points. How about in Virginia? Abigail Spanberger won that vote by 56 points. It doesn't necessarily matter, it turns out, that the Democrats are viewed that unfavorably, because amongst those who like neither party, the Democrats ran away with it. I started off with a running analogy, talking about the African desert. These folks are like Usain Bolt. Despite the fact that despite the fact that Democrats are viewed unfavorably, Democrats are like Usain Bolt because Donald Trump is like rocket fuel and they're able to run away from the pack. And I think Usain Bolt would leave both of us in the dust.
You were also...
There you have it, right? Donald Trump, his response at the Republican breakfast following the shellacking that the Republican Party received on Tuesday night, said that we lost because I wasn't on the ballot. No, motherfucker, you were on the ballot. You were all over the ballot. And that's exactly why Republicans lost, because your policies are bullshit, because your policies are hurting people. And guess what? It turns out Americans don't like overt cruelty, right? They don't like seeing preschool teachers dragged out of their classrooms by ICE like they did in Chicago this week and kidnapping her from her classroom and traumatizing the fucking children inside. Turns out that they don't want to go to the grocery store and know that they're paying higher prices now than they were a year ago. Turns out that people actually, after 15 years, like Obamacare. It works for them. It may not be perfect, but at least they have health care. And so when Donald Trump says, well, you know, in 2028, when I'm back on the ballot and all of this shit and blah, 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 it's like, nah, dude, the people don't like you. They don't like your policies. And the Republicans that stood 10 toes down for Donald Trump lost spectacularly. Which leads me to wonder aloud whether or not Kamala Harris actually really lost the election in 2024. Because Donald Trump was unpopular when he left office, and he's unpopular now. Wildly unpopular. And do you know who isn't hanging out with Donald Trump right now? Who was hanging out with him in 2024? Elon Musk. You know, Starlink. Just saying. Just saying. Nonetheless, why is this day also not good for Donald Trump? Well, because the jobs numbers came out and it is fucking tragic. And don't take my word for it. Take the word of the folks over at CNBC.
Since we're not getting the official data from the government, we are looking to all these private sources. And Challenger Gray & Christmas, which is an employment firm, put out, they always do these layoff numbers. This one was a doozy. So the most job cuts for any October in more than 2 decades, going back to 2003. Companies announced 153,000 about job cuts last month, which was almost triple the number during the same month last year. And the question is why? Well, if you go to the quote from Challenger in the release, I mean, they do mention disruptive technology and AI changing the landscape. They actually compare it to 2003 when the cell phone was invented. But you know, there are all sorts of reasons we have heard from companies lately about job cuts. And if you look at Target or UPS or Amazon, I mean, all of these companies have announced job cuts recently. Paramount, Skydance announcing recent job cuts as well. Starbucks, Delta Airlines, CarMax, Rivian Automotive. Yeah, some of them talk about, you know, technology. Amazon spoke about that, but a lot of them are just sort of restructuring and right-sizing their businesses after, you know, hiring a lot during COVID. But
we're facing challenges a la Paramount. You just have to take out a lot of structural costs if you can. Right?
Yeah, and that also comes from an acquisition. But the bottom line is it's adding up to a narrative where we're starting to be a little bit more concerned about the job market. We know the Fed is more concerned right now about the job market and the labor market, and we're just not getting the weekly, you know, initial jobless claims. We hadn't seen a lot of layoffs in those numbers. And the caveat here is that the Challenger data is very volatile. It doesn't always correspond to what we get on the government data, but we're paying closer attention to it these days because we're not getting the government data, and we are starting to hear these announcements from companies.
Yeah, a couple of
So why aren't we getting the government data? Well, one, because we're in a government shutdown, but two, because Donald Trump doesn't want you to have the government data because he's fired the people who, you know, have run the stats on the job numbers, on the economy. And when he doesn't like the numbers, he just fires those people. And so, like she said a number of times, well, we have to rely on these private companies that don't necessarily provide as detailed of information as the federal government does. But the picture that is being painted here is one that isn't fucking good, right? And so, again, CNBC, corporate jobs cut in the U.S. surging past 1 million. 1 million so far this year, with 153 layoffs announced just in October. That is the worst October, as they said, since 2003. Layoffs in October up 153,000. That's 100,000 more than September and 100,000 more than this time last year.
A clue from like a cough or a sneeze or whatever, but announced corporate job cuts, Andrew, in the U.S. surging past 1 million so far this year, with 153,000 new layoffs announced just in October, according to Challenger. That is the worst October since 2003. Here are the numbers. October up 153. That compares with September. That's 100,000 more than September and 100,000 more than this time last year in October 2024. Andy Challenger commenting, some industries are correcting after the hiring boom of the pandemic, but this comes as AI adoption, softening consumer and corporate spending, and rising costs drive belt tightening and hiring freezes. Announced layoffs don't always lead to actual cuts and could take place from attrition, but the report puts in perspective what we've been reporting here day after day, week after week. Series of marquee announcements unveiled in recent weeks across U.S. industries, including UPS, Amazon, Target, among others, Paramount, Rivian, all these companies there. Government has been responsible year to date for 308,000. But look at that, tech 141. That could be where you see a lot of the AI, maybe some in warehousing, but a big chunk of that's going to be UPS, as well as potentially some hit from reduced flows of trade. Retail's up there, as is services at 64,000. You take out the Doge cuts, the number's a bit better at 800,000, but still well above last year. Challenger doesn't see much in the way of hiring, saying announced plans are 35% below last year, and they're skeptical about the number of new hires for the holiday season. For some on the Fed, this data, together with other reports, could be the sign they're looking for of job weaknesses about whether to cut in December.
And I also believe, right, that we are going to see, and hopefully so, because of the blackouts that people are organizing with regard to purchasing for the holiday season, that ain't nobody got any money, right? So what would normally be a boon for the economy between Thanksgiving and the Christmas holiday ain't gonna fucking happen. Not with 1 million people that have lost their jobs. And that number is only going to increase. And what's funny is that it's not as if these companies are losing money. It's not as if the CEOs are losing money. No. They're just firing people to continue at the same level that they are. But the fact is that the blackouts, right, that are about to happen, on top of the fact that people just do not have the money, and this government shutdown will probably still be going in January. On top of which, this dodo, right now, the Supreme Court is deciding whether or not they're going to strike down Donald Trump's tariffs, which have been a tax on the American people, because guess who gets to set tax structure on the American people? It is Congress. And so Donald Trump kind of let the cat out of the bag in a certain way, because he was talking about how, well, we're going to have to pay back money if, in fact, the Supreme Court strikes down his illegal tariffs.
Issues are ruling. It could be several weeks. Are you going to lay out any new additional tariffs before?
I don't want to talk about it. I'm going to hope that we win. I can't imagine that anybody would do that kind of devastation to our country. You know, we'd have to pay back trillions of dollars. We've taken in trillions. We haven't taken in billions. We've taken in trillions of dollars. We've made trade deals based on that give us, as an example, European Union, $950 billion. Japan, $650 billion. South Korea, $350 billion. Without this, we're not talking about that kind of money. And they're okay. They're satisfied. They love us. I just left. They all love us. So it's not like we're such bad people. But they were doing it to us.
It's like, I feel stupider every time I listen to him. So here's another question. Chief Justice from a reporter. And I'm going to play this clip, and I'm going to say the question because you can't really hear it in the room. The question from the reporter is, Chief Justice Roberts said tariffs are taxes paid by Americans, yet you're saying this money is rolling in from other countries. How do you square that? Meaning, How do you make that make sense when we know that tariffs are a tax on the American people and that the money that is quote unquote rolling in is coming out of our fucking pockets? So you can take a listen to the lies that he says here.
Yesterday, the Supreme Court Chief Justice Roberts said that tariffs are taxes and that they're paid by Americans. He said this pretty clearly. And yet you're saying that this money is rolling in from other countries. How do you square those two?
It is. It's coming in because they've charged us. You know, those same countries that you talk about are charging us massive amounts of money. If you look at the tariffs over the years that were put on our heads, there's a reason we're $38 trillion owed. Now that money's going to start coming down. But we had presidents that didn't know how to use tariffs. We had presidents that had no understanding of business. But if you take a look at what's happened to us, every country charges tariffs.
Also, if you look at his eyes, he doesn't look well. I know that I say this on a regular basis, but it's the truth. He genuinely doesn't look well. Like he looks like he is not all there. Do you know what I'm saying? And he's just mumbling on about, well, if you look at these other, yes, other countries charge tariffs, but they're not at 100%. They're not at 50%, right? We negotiate so that we can trade with one another without harming our countries. Like, that's the point. You have alliances, right, that help each other's economies. That's not what Donald Trump has done at all. And all of the economists that wrote in before the election and said, if Donald Trump institutes the kind of tariffs that he's talking about, it is going to tank the economy. And you see that in practice right now. And so, again, you know, it's even people inside of his own party that are saying the quiet part out loud. Rand Paul has been one of the most vocal opponents of tariffs.
A fan of tariffs. Do you want to see them struck down by the Supreme Court?
I want to see the Constitution have meaning. And the Constitution said that taxes originate in the House. Tariffs are a tax, and anybody who tries to say tariffs are not a tax, just not serious people. Our founding fathers wanted the taxes to start in the House because the House was elected every 2 years and the closest to the people. But they were very, very specific. We fought the revolution over taxation without representation. A president cannot levy taxes without the approval of Congress. I think the Supreme Court's going to strike this down, and it's not for any personal vendetta against the president. I like the president. I wish him and our country success. But we have to do things in an orderly constitutional manner, or it can lead to chaos. Right now,
or it can lead to chaos, right? And what he was about to say are the farmers that are suffering because of Donald Trump's tariffs that have had the Chinese buy zero amount of our soybeans and instead go to Brazil and go to Argentina, which, by the way, he just bailed out with $40 billion. So we have federal judge saying that Donald Trump needs to release full SNAP benefits by tomorrow. Then you have the Supreme Court likely going to overturn Donald Trump's tariffs. And now, where we are as we get closer and closer to the holiday season, flight cuts could hit biggest airports from coast to coast. Flight cancellations. This is according to the New York Times. Transportation officials plans to slash traffic by 10% at 40 major airports because of the government shutdown could affect hubs across the country, including New York, Washington, Atlanta, Chicago, Charlotte, Los Angeles, Las Vegas, Philadelphia, Phoenix, Seattle, and many other cities, according to Federal Aviation Administration spokeswoman. Transportation officials were expected to release more details about the cuts on Thursday, with the reduction set to begin tomorrow. FAA and Transportation Department officials have said the traffic reduction is necessary to ease pressure on air traffic controllers working without pay during the longest government shutdown in U.S. history. Do you know what the second longest government shutdown was? Oh, that's right, Donald Trump's first term. A coalition of groups representing airlines, aerospace manufacturers, pilots, and travelers urged Congress on Thursday to end the standoff, which has now lasted for more than 36 days. And the news just keeps coming in for Donald Trump from the courts, because now we have another one. Judge criticizes immigration agents in Chicago. Use of force shocks the conscience. Judge Sarah L. Ellis said she saw little reason for the use of force that federal agents are currently using. Sarah Ellis, a federal district court for the Northern District of Illinois, said that government officials, including the senior Border Patrol official Gregory Bavino, had repeatedly lied about their tactics and actions against protesters. The injunction granted by Judge Ellis on Thursday extends temporary restrictions that she issued last month. Judge Ellis ordered federal agents to wear body cameras, give at least 2 audible warnings before using riot control weapons, and to use those weapons only to preserve life or prevent catastrophic outcomes. She said this: I see little reason for the use of force that the federal agents are currently using. The use of force shocks the conscience. A representative for the Department of Homeland Security said that the department will appeal the injunction, which the representative described in a statement as an extreme act by an activist judge that risked the lives and livelihoods of law enforcement officers. Folks, let me go back to this picture. This was tear gas that was launched in a residential area at unarmed citizens. Do you see what the ICE agent is wearing? The stance and the outfit that looks like it is straight out of a combat zone? Do you see the regular citizens that are standing on the street? So when the Department of Homeland Security wants to talk about, the safety of fucking law enforcement that are cosplaying as fucking G.I. Joe, what are you even talking about? And an activist judge, one with eyes and ears, that is saying that you are treating U.S. citizens as if they are combatants, which they are not. It's wild. So as we wind down today's show, I would be remiss if I did not bring up the announcement that Nancy Pelosi made today. Pelosi plans to retire in 2027 after 39 years in Congress. Pelosi, the only female speaker, said she will not run for re-election. She wielded immense power and became a Democratic icon while she was demonized by conservatives. Pelosi, 85, was the nation's first and only female House Speaker, and she will have represented San Francisco in Congress for 39 years when she leaves office. She has served during an era of seismic change for American society and her own city, from the throes of the AIDS crisis to the legalization of gay marriage, and through the meteoric rise of the tech sector and the nation's extreme polarization. With a grateful heart, I look forward to my final year of service as your proud representative, she told constituents in a nearly 6-minute video that she posted on X. And here's the thing, folks. Nancy Pelosi is an icon. Nancy Pelosi is the reason why healthcare was pushed through, why Obamacare became a thing, became policy. Nancy Pelosi knew how to whip votes, knew how to keep her caucus together. Nancy Pelosi also, through younger women of color who rose to power during her tenure as Speaker, under the bus. Nancy Pelosi also negotiated on the backs of Black and brown people. I don't think that people should hold fucking jobs for 40 years. Call me crazy. But Nancy Pelosi probably should have retired after we lost the House. Not because it was necessarily her fault, but because job well done. Move out of the fucking way. These politicians become so ego-driven that they refuse to give up the baton. And many of them literally die in office. These people should be creating pipelines for younger, more progressive, thoughtful voices. And I do believe that there should not be a position that you can have in government that isn't term limited. And that includes the fucking Supreme Court. You should not have a job for life. I think that you go 2, 3 terms and then you're out. To make room for other people. But holding on to these seats with their fucking, cold, dead hands, all it does is hurt younger generations because they are so fucking far removed from how the average person lives because they've been taking corporate money, doing insider trading, a whole bunch of things for decades. So while I appreciate and can honestly say that I genuinely appreciate and am grateful for Nancy Pelosi's service, ma'am, you should not have been in that job for 39 fucking years. And frankly, other people like Chuck Schumer and others need to fucking take notice and move out the way. Your time is up. It's time for a new generation of leaders. And in today's Upside Down, of all the people to comment on Nancy Pelosi's retirement,
I will praise Nancy Pelosi. She had an incredible career for her party. I served under her speakership in my first term of Congress, and I'm very impressed at her ability to get things done. I wish we could get things done for our party like Nancy Pelosi was able to deliver for her party. So I wish her well in her retirement.
It's like land of the body snatchers over there. I mean, just... okay. So that's where we leave things today, dear friends. It is time for new leadership, for fresh leadership in the Democratic Party. It is time that we get leaders that actually aren't comfortable with giving us the bare minimum, aren't comfortable with giving us the crumbs. It is obvious that Donald Trump's policies are wildly unpopular and they're all failing. I've said this before, and I said this before this week's election, that Donald Trump is weak. The party is weak. It's why they escalate the violence. It's why they escalate the distractions. But this past week's elections prove he is wildly unpopular and the tide is beginning to turn. So this is the time that we all need to put our foot on the gas, to activate ourselves where we are with what we have in order to change this country. We have got to hold on to the hope that would, provided with this election, and realize that change is possible so long as we believe it is. And to me, friends, America is still a country that drives me crazy, that breaks my heart, and is still worth fighting for. Excuse me. Well, friends, I will be back tomorrow, 12 p.m. Eastern, with Wajahat Ali for Democracy-ish. I have videos that are up right now on my interviews that I've been doing on the election and how folks are feeling about it. And there is a video that is up right now with Ahmad Baba. So I absolutely think that you should take a watch of that. And programming note, I am taking Monday off. Why? Because it is my birthday. And I do not work on my birthday. But I promise you that I will be leaving you with content, and I will be back. The Danielle Moodie Show will be back in full effect and live on Tuesday. But Monday, I'm taking the day off to relax, to have some champagne, to enjoy my birthday. So here is the thing that I ask of all of you. Memberships are now available, 2-tier memberships for this channel. If you have the ability to become a paid subscriber of this channel, do consider doing so. I was hoping to reach 100 paid subscribers by my birthday on Monday. But again, folks, I know the climate that we're in, and I know that money is not available for everybody. So I'm just putting out an ask for those that have the ability to consider becoming a paid subscriber of this channel. Help me get to 100 paid subscribers by Monday. I'm halfway there. So I'm really just looking at, 50 more folks that are interested in doing that. But I'm excited, folks. I think that we need to hold on to the energy that we got this week. We need to manifest more progress and figure out how we can help each other, how we can link arms, how we can activate our neighbors, how we can donate to food banks, how we can volunteer, how we can be of service. That's the question that we should be asking ourselves each and every day of this regime until we kick them out of power. I appreciate all the early birthday wishes. I thank you all so very much for the well wishes and the support that you've given me and given this channel. So before I get out of here, as my mother reminded me that I did not say the names yesterday because I was running out of time of my super stickers and super thanks. But you all know how much I appreciate every single dollar, every single cent that you send my way. This is independent media and it is people powered. I would not be able to do this work without each and every single one of you. So Janice, thank you so much for your $10. Game Shark, as always, for your $5. Susan, thank you so much for gifting a membership to the channel. Ernst, as always, thank you for your $5. Shirley, thank you so much for your $20. Storm, for your $10. Evelyn, for your $4.99. ARMCC, as always, for the pounds that you are bringing in to me from the UK. Mary Sullivan, oh, thank you so much, for your generosity with $49.99 for my birthday. Thank you so much. And Susan, again, gifting another membership. Appreciate you. And Purpose, thank you so much for the $20. Each and every dollar that you all are able to share allows me to continue to provide you with the kind of content you deserve with integrity and passion. And I appreciate each and every single one of you. So tomorrow we'll be back at 12 p.m. Eastern with Waj for Democracy-ish. Monday, I am off for my birthday, but there will be videos, so do stay tuned. There is a video up right now with Ahmad Baba, so check that out. And the Danielle Moodie Show will be back live on Tuesday. You all have a fantastic weekend. Take care of yourselves. Take care of each other. As always, power to the people and to all the people power. Get woke, stay sane. And in these extraordinarily dangerous times, dear friends, do stay safe. I will see you back here tomorrow, 12 p.m. Eastern.